2025 wasn't just another chaotic year, it was the year nature fought back. From the very first days of January to the final hours of December, the planet hit back with everything: earthquakes, eruptions, floods, storms, fires, relentless, overlapping, and impossible to ignore. It was a global wake-up call delivered through a non-stop barrage of disasters. Every continent, every region, every corner of the world felt it. If you thought climate change was a slow-moving crisis, 2025 shattered that illusion.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
This was not the year of isolated events. It was a chain reaction, as if the planet had flipped a switch and left us scrambling for answers. Disasters didn't just happen, they stacked. Cyclones struck before floodwaters could recede. Wildfires raged while heat waves baked entire cities. And every single one of these events exposed just how fragile our systems really are. It started with the skies. Cyclones and hurricanes hit harder and more frequently than we've seen in recent memory. The Philippines and Jamaica were repeatedly slammed, sometimes by back-to-back storms that made rebuilding impossible. Entire communities were caught in a loop: destroy, rebuild, repeat. But this wasn't random. The storms were supercharged, fueled by warmer oceans that gave them more energy, more speed, and far more power. These weren't your average seasonal systems. They were aggressive, fast-evolving storms that defied prediction models and left meteorologists scrambling to keep up. Volcanic eruptions followed, turning quiet landscapes into disaster zones overnight. Iceland, Indonesia, Mount Etna. These weren't minor tremors or isolated bursts. These were major, disruptive events that forced evacuations, shut down airspace, and blanketed regions in ash. And while the world focused on the spectacle, the real damage was often in the aftermath: displaced populations, halted economies, and cascading effects on travel, agriculture, and infrastructure. Then came the floods. In Southeast Asia, the monsoon season didn't just arrive, it consumed. Rivers spilled into cities, fields turned into lakes. Villages were isolated for weeks, cut off from food and aid. Crops were destroyed, leaving deep scars on economies and food security. The volume of rain was staggering. It wasn't just bad weather. It was the kind of flooding that only makes sense when you understand how climate change is supercharging rainfall, turning atmospheric rivers into deluges. Meanwhile, Europe and North America were burning. Heat waves pushed temperatures in Madrid past 44 degrees Celsius. Power grids failed. Hospitals overflowed. Cities weren't built for this level of sustained heat, and the result was deadly. As temperatures rose, wildfires erupted across the Mediterranean. Forests, farmlands, suburbs, nothing was safe. Fires didn't just burn, they exploded. Fueled by drought, heat, and dry winds, entire regions were consumed within days. And again, this wasn't random. Prolonged droughts and extreme heat are the new normal in a warming climate. At the coastlines, the water brought its own kind of devastation. Rising sea levels meant storm surges from hurricanes and typhoons overwhelmed barriers that were never built to withstand this. Urban centers were swamped, infrastructure collapsed, and recovery became a logistical nightmare. These weren't hundred-year floods, they were happening every year. And the rising baseline meant that even a moderate storm could now trigger catastrophic flooding. But it wasn't just the disasters themselves, it was how quickly they escalated. Typhoon Ragasso was the most glaring example. It intensified at a speed forecasters could barely track, exposing the flaws in our predictive models. The storm changed everything in a matter of hours. Residents didn't have time to prepare. Evacuation zones were underestimated. Emergency systems were overwhelmed. It was a brutal reminder: our technology isn't keeping pace with the climate. What 2025 made painfully clear is that none of these disasters are isolated. They're linked by the oceans, by the atmosphere, and by human activity. Ocean warming doesn't just power storms, it melts glaciers, disrupts weather systems, and throws entire ecosystems into disarray. Rising temperatures don't just mean hotter summers, they dry out vegetation, fuel wildfires, and stress water supplies. The climate system is interconnected, and so are its consequences. This is the part we can't ignore. Environmental degradation is making all of this worse. Deforestation weakens land stability, making floods and landslides more destructive. Urban sprawl into floodplains and wildfire-prone areas puts more lives at risk. And poor land use planning. It's practically begging for disaster. We're not just victims of nature, we are active participants in our own vulnerability.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
Throughout 2025, one theme kept resurfacing: we are not ready. Forecasting models failed to predict sudden shifts. Infrastructure crumbled under pressure. Emergency responses were slow, underfunded, or blocked by logistics. The world wasn't just dealing with disasters, it was exposed by them. What we thought were rare events are now regular occurrences. The standards we relied on, obsolete. And yet, this year wasn't just about destruction. It was also a brutally honest audit of our systems: what works, what doesn't, and where we're dangerously underprepared. The takeaway: we need resilience. Not just the word real, structural, system-wide change. Cities need to be redesigned with climate extremes in mind. Early warning systems need to be faster, more accurate, and accessible to every community. Emergency protocols have to adapt to a new normal where disasters don't wait their turn. We also need to rethink how we plan and where we build. Communities that once seemed safe are now on the front lines of storms, floods, and fires. If 2025 taught us anything, it's that relying on outdated assumptions is no longer an option. But most of all, 2025 was a year that showed how global this crisis is. It's not just about one region or one country. Every disaster had ripple effects on economies, supply chains, migration, and political stability. Local events became global problems, and solving them, that's going to require cooperation on a level we haven't seen before. Cutting emissions, investing in green infrastructure, supporting vulnerable nations, these aren't just environmental goals anymore. They're survival strategies. And while climate action often feels abstract, 2025 made it painfully real. So, what comes next? That depends on how seriously we take what we've just lived through. The disasters of 2025 weren't flukes. They were warnings. If we treat them as isolated crises, we'll stay stuck in this endless cycle of damage and recovery. But if we finally recognize the patterns, see the links, acknowledge the science, and invest in resilience, we have a chance. Because here's the truth: the climate is changing faster than our systems. But it doesn't have to outpace our response. We can choose to adapt. We can upgrade, plan better, and build smarter. But the clock is ticking, and the next storm, the next fire, the next flood, they're not going to wait for us to catch up. If this breakdown of 2025 shook you even a little, hit that like button, share this with someone who still thinks this is all just weather, and drop a comment with your thoughts. Are we doing enough? What should be the top priority? And don't forget to subscribe. We're breaking down the chaos so you don't have to. And just when you thought it couldn't get worse, 2025 kept going. The disasters didn't taper off. They doubled down. The middle of the year blurred into a relentless sequence of emergencies. By July, headlines started to feel like reruns. Deadly heatwave grips southern Europe, mass evacuations in Indonesia, flash floods cut off entire provinces. You couldn't tell if it was news or just yesterday's catastrophe playing on loop. The wildfires in the Mediterranean reached apocalyptic levels. In places like Greece, Turkey, and southern Italy, entire mountain ranges lit up like matchsticks. Firefighters were outnumbered, overworked, and dangerously under-equipped. And as one blaze was barely controlled, 3 more would break out. The smoke turned skies orange. Airports closed. Tourism collapsed. Local economies crumbled under the weight of back-to-back disasters. But the flames didn't care about borders. Wildfire smoke traveled across Europe, degrading air quality in cities hundreds of miles away. In Spain, power grids failed during peak heat. Hospitals saw a spike in heat-related illnesses. Cities were forced to open cooling centers, but even those became overwhelmed. Temperatures stayed in the 40s for weeks. Asphalt melted. Roads buckled. Life, as usual, became impossible. And let's not forget North America. The western U.S. saw record-breaking drought and heat. Forests that had been dry for years went up in flames within hours. The fire season wasn't a season anymore, it was the whole year. Canada, too, wasn't spared. The fires jumped provinces, with smoke choking out cities like Toronto and Montreal. Air quality alerts became routine. People started checking smoke maps as often as weather apps. At the same time, the East Coast was drowning. Hurricanes brought historic storm surges that breached coastal defenses, flooding cities from the Carolinas to New York. Infrastructure that had held for decades gave out under the pressure. Subways flooded. Highways turned into rivers. In some areas, The damage was so extensive that local governments started floating the idea of retreat, literally moving entire communities inland. And this wasn't just about wind and water. The psychological toll was real. People were tired. Recovery became a state of being, not a phase. Insurance companies started pulling out of high-risk areas altogether, leaving residents without coverage or options. If your home burned or flooded, good luck rebuilding. If you hadn't already left, you were probably thinking about it. Meanwhile, down in Southeast Asia, the monsoon season dragged on like an unwanted guest. Rainfall broke records set just the year before. Floodplains became permanent lakes. Entire villages were submerged for weeks. Transportation networks collapsed, cutting off millions. Aid couldn't reach where it was needed. Crops were destroyed again, putting food security under intense pressure. And the worst part, these weren't surprise disasters. Scientists had been warning about this for years. Warmer air holds more moisture. Warmer oceans feed stronger storms. Prolonged heat dries everything out. And yet, here we are, getting caught off guard by events that were absolutely predictable, if not in date, then in pattern. But the cracks weren't just in the earth. They were in our systems, our responses, our leadership. Take Typhoon Ragasa. It intensified so fast, the models couldn't keep up. One moment, it was a tropical storm. The next, a monster. People had hours to evacuate if they got the warning in time. Some didn't. Infrastructure failed. Cell towers went down. Emergency broadcasts were delayed. Entire communities were blindsided by a storm that arrived like a freight train and left nothing but wreckage. And the rage afterward wasn't just about the destruction. It was about how we still haven't figured out how to handle this. How are we still here, still unable to warn people in time, still rebuilding in danger zones, still reacting instead of preparing? Throughout the year, the same vulnerabilities kept showing up. Fragile infrastructure, poor land use planning, underfunded emergency services, inflexible systems that weren't built for the world we're now living in. It was like watching a failing group project, but the consequences were human lives, not bad grades. And then there was the economic ripple. Every disaster came with a cost: billions lost, industries disrupted, supply chains tangled beyond recognition. Agricultural losses led to rising food prices. Floods knocked out factories and shipping hubs. Wildfires disrupted tourism. Insurance markets buckled under the pressure. And let's be real, when one country struggles, the whole world feels it. That's the thing about 2025. It didn't just break things, it revealed how interconnected we all are. Even countries that weren't hit directly felt the blowback. Global food prices surged. Flights were grounded. Markets panicked. And the worst part, there was no time to regroup. Just as recovery efforts started in one region, another disaster unfolded halfway around the globe. It was crisis after crisis, without pause. So what are we supposed to take from all this? That we're doomed? Not quite. But the message is clear. Resilience isn't optional anymore. It's not a nice to have. It's the only way forward. And that doesn't just mean better buildings or stronger levees. It means changing how we plan, how we prepare, and how we respond. It means early warning systems that actually work under pressure. Infrastructure that isn't built to 20th century standards. Disaster response teams that are trained, funded, and ready. And yes, it means addressing the root causes: climate change, environmental degradation, unchecked development. Because if we don't, we'll be right back here. Maybe next year. Maybe sooner. Only next time, it'll be worse. We also have to talk about accountability. Because let's be honest, some of this was preventable. Not the disasters themselves, maybe, but the scale of the destruction. Absolutely. We've known for years where the risks were. We've had the data, the science, the warnings. But instead of action, we got delay. Instead of leadership, we got half measures and empty promises. And now, communities are paying the price. So here we are, the end of 2025. A year that felt like nature's breaking point, and maybe ours too. But if there's a silver lining, it's this. No one can say they didn't see it coming anymore. The evidence is everywhere. In the fires, the floods, the storms, the heat. This is the new baseline. And what we do now, how we rebuild, how we adapt, how we lead will define what happens next. This isn't about fear. It's about reality. About facing the world we've created and choosing to respond with clarity and urgency. Because while the disasters of 2025 were global, so is the solution. It's going to take cooperation, innovation, and yes, real, sustained investment in the systems that keep us safe. So the next time someone calls climate change a future problem, remind them, the future is already here. It flooded the streets, burned the hillsides, and knocked out the power. And if we're not careful, 2025 will just be the beginning. And if you're still processing the sheer scope of what happened in 2025, you're not alone. Because somewhere between the 5th megaflood and the 12th climate-fueled wildfire, people started realizing we're not just watching a bad year unfold. We're watching the rules change. The scale, the speed, the stakes, all of it. This wasn't a slow creep into crisis. It was a plunge. There were no buffers left. No off-seasons. Just back-to-back disasters, revealing every weak point in our systems and shattering the illusion that this kind of destruction only happens somewhere else. By now, climate volatility is no longer a theory or a forecast, it's lived experience. People who used to think of disaster relief as something happening on the other side of the world were suddenly packing go bags, navigating evacuation routes, or watching their homes disappear in real time. That psychological shift, it matters. It marks the difference between denial and survival. But here's the bitter truth. Awareness doesn't equal action. And for much of 2025, leadership lagged behind reality. Some governments delayed evacuations. Some underplayed forecasts. Others failed to invest in infrastructure until it literally broke apart. And again, it was the most vulnerable communities, those with the fewest resources, who bore the brunt. Whether it was rural villages submerged in floodwaters or urban neighborhoods left to suffocate in wildfire smoke, the impacts weren't just environmental, they were deeply unequal. And this is what makes it even more urgent. These disasters didn't just destroy homes. They exposed fault lines in how we plan, govern, and respond. If 2025 felt like an unraveling, it's because the foundations weren't built for what we're facing now. Infrastructure meant to last a century crumbled in a single season. Response systems designed for yesterday's storms were swamped by today's realities. And yet, even after all of that, the investment gap remains massive. The conversation is still stuck in short-term fixes. Patch the levee, rebuild the bridge, put out the fire. But without long-term planning, we're just reliving the same nightmare on a loop. What's missing is the commitment to real, proactive resilience. Not just better predictions, but better protections. Not just emergency funding, but future-proofing. The kind of systems that don't just respond to chaos but prevent it. That's where we need to go. Fast. Because the one thing 2025 made excruciatingly clear is that these disasters don't wait for policy debates or 5-year planning cycles. They arrive when they want, how they want, and when they hit, it's already too late to start asking, what should we have done? So the real question now is, will we learn? Will we actually take what this year taught us and build systems that don't break at the first sign of pressure? Or will we write another report, draft another press release, and wait for the next catastrophe to prove again that we weren't ready? Because if we walk away from 2025 thinking it was just a bad year, we've already failed the next one. If you're still with us, thanks for sticking through it. These aren't easy conversations, but they're necessary. And we're going to keep having them because pretending things are fine doesn't make them so. So go ahead, hit like if this hit home. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What shook you the most about 2025? What do you think needs to happen now? And if you haven't already, subscribe. We're not done. Not even close. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, you're officially part of the small percentage of people who don't just click away, and that means a lot. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts, your ideas, or even what you'd like to see next. I read every single one of them, and your feedback genuinely shapes the direction of this channel. If you enjoyed the video, tap that like button. It tells YouTube this content is worth sharing. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next upload. We've got more exciting videos coming, and trust me, you'll want to be here for them. This channel is just getting started, and your support helps it grow faster than you realize. Thank you again for spending a part of your day here with me. Stay curious, stay motivated, and as always, take care of yourself. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.